Sabrina's 70s comic, issue 16. We started out with Jughead saying that he likes lazy summer days, and Sabrina says that she agrees, but after a while it gets boring trying to figure out things to do, being relatable. Archie agrees, and Jughead asks if he can borrow a book. Isn't it predictable that he might pick out a magic book? What was she thinking? I guess she thinks that most of the books are normal ones, and so it's worth the risk. That and he wouldn't believe the book even if it was a magic-related one, as he assumes it's a put-on about people pretending to believe in witchcraft. After finding it slipped behind the other books, he says he'll take the book along for laughs. He laughs at the book, thinking it had a sense of humor. He says a spell, and out of complete nowhere, he actually does create the blizzard despite being immortal. The only way this could make sense is if he is a witch, and his parents are not his real parents. He thinks that he'd be scared of someone with that much power, as I wish this comic explained why he was able to do this right away. Like by having someone say that the residual magic of Sabrina or Hilda is still on the book, after all the times they used it. So their fingerprints let anyone who has the book cast magic with it. I guess Sabrina's clothes would have magic on it too. He reads out a spell that turns someone into a frog, and then summons a dragon. This is especially weird to me because I don't remember mortals being able to cast spells with a magic book in the sitcom, which I saw first. Finally, oblivious to everything he did, he shows Sabrina the magic book. For some reason, Sabrina thinks she needs her family's help to undo all of Jughead's spell. How are they supposed to undo the frog spell when they don't know what the person used to look like? The story ends being even more confusing, because since Jughead memorized one of the spells, he turns Archie into an ugly, furry beast without the book. I guess the magic book's residual magic is still with him, after only one contact with it, but it'll go away really soon. What would separate witches from mortals if all a mortal has to do to get witchcraft is read out spells in a book? That's pretty interesting at least, but that's not what I would imagine. There has to be a reason the witches call the immortals humans, as if they're different species. But Jughead's a human. You'd think Sabrina would say that this means he's a witch. In the next comedy page, Sabrina sees a girl she knows crying because her boyfriend doesn't love her anymore. So Sabrina instantly considers giving her a love potion. This might be the only series in modern times to treat a love potion like a perfectly fine, noble thing. Surprisingly, the mortal tried the love potion the way Sabrina told her to, I guess out of desperation. Because she put a few drops on one of his apples, now she can't get Michael away from the apple tree. I'm not sure that's how the potion would work, because who would want anyone to fall in love with the tree? At least that was amusing to look at. In the comedy half page, Sabrina's so bored by her class that she wishes she was 1,000 miles away, and then she gets teleported to a desert island as a result. In the next half page, the same teacher tells her to put new ribbons on all the typewriters. She casts a spell and immediately puts new ribbons on every typewriter. It took me a while to think, what if Sabrina's just being too literal? At first I assumed the joke was just that she did the job suspiciously fast, so Miss Grundy would realize she had to use magic. But then I wondered why Miss Grundy would actually want ribbons on the typewriters. I guess Sabrina wasn't paying attention when she first explained what that forgotten ancient slang actually meant. Then there's the comedy page where Reggie asks Sabrina if Hilda reads tea leaves. He asks her to read his tea leaves, and she says that someone's gonna swindle him out of $5, and it's her. I predicted that one because I've seen the same basic joke in Sonic X, but it was funnier there because there was more said by the guy talking to Knuckles. It was about him not making a fool out of himself, and he was told to do something that make a fool out of him. That required more effort because the writer had to think of what Knuckles would be told to do. Why did he even ask Hilda if she read tea leaves? I guess he happened to hear about that and hoped he'd meet someone like that. In the next comedy page, Harvey tries to put mustard on a sub and it gets it on his hand thanks to Hilda. Anyways, in the next story, Veronica tells Sabrina that her secret of success with Archie is subtle but firm control over him. She says that's amazing what boys can be taught to do. She wastes time before explaining that if she follows her advice, she'll make boys do whatever she wants. and she advised her to always make them think it was their idea. It sure took a long time for the comic to remind me what Veronica's personality is, considering how long she's been in it. Archie shows up, and Veronica prepares to show Sabrina how it's done. Veronica tells Sabrina goodbye, and then says it's spooky how the trees close in on her. So he's manipulated into telling her to stay close to him. And because she pretends to be scared, she hugs him and he kisses her. Then she frustrates me by pushing him away and insulting him for taking advantage of her, even though she clearly wanted it, because wasn't that the whole reason she was manipulating him into holding her? Also, why doesn't she just ask him to hold her? She's looking like an unappealing girlfriend by not just being honest with him and speeding things up and making things way simpler. Archie apologizes and says he doesn't know what came over him. And Veronica says that he still thinks that kiss was his idea. How? Harvey walks over to Sabrina as she looks annoyed, and Sabrina thinks that this egomaniac needs to be brought down a peg or two. I guess that story where he was acting insecure and said he was scared of life really was out of character. Sabrina jokes that she'll have Harvey carry her across the street. Veronica says that she can't ask him to do things. I wish she explained because he might not want to do it, so he'd say no. Still, asking sounds a lot simpler. Sabrina says right in front of Harvey that she's not going to say a word. And after he puts her down, he'll sit on the bench and lie on it and flip and climb a tree and shout his love for her. Then after Veronica's annoyed by her sarcasm, Sabrina casts a spell to brainwash Harvey into doing exactly that. I guess to embarrass and show up Veronica because she knows Veronica's a jerk. She's morally gray enough to be fine with this just for kicks. But on the bright side, if she was really evil, she'd do this to him all the time. The story ends with Veronica being terrified of Sabrina and telling Archie to run away, and fortunately Sabrina's happy about this instead of depressing me by her feelings being hurt. That was satisfying, but it is kinda horrifying that Sabrina did that to him. In the next comedy page, Hilda brings Sabrina to a special supermarket for witches only. That immediately reminded me of the Witch Mart in the 90s comic. Sabrina's happy that it has everything a witch could ask for, while in the 90s comic, she hated it for that very reason. Here, it's all summed up and relegated to a comedy page. The supposed punchline is that there's no inflation here, so they let you pay for everything with magic money, which you'd think would also have inflation. If everyone on a planet could just zap up money whenever they wanted, the money would be valued as worthless. In the next comedy page, Hilda's annoyed at Harvey and Sabrina watching a movie with loud gunshots in it, naturally. So instead of just going somewhere else, she uses magic to summon the archer on horseback from the movie to chase him out of the house. Why does Sabrina have dates with him at her house? In the next comedy page, Sabrina explains that Archie's been looking in that window for the past hour. He sees something he likes, but he doesn't think he'll get what he wants. He doesn't even tell Sabrina what he wants. So how is she supposed to correctly guess? I guess it's a woman. She casts a spell to make the delivery man bring to him what his heart desires. The story ends with him being delivered a woman. Either that or a mannequin. No, it's a woman. He was staring at the woman working at the store. It was hard to tell because he was looking at Sabrina when he said that. I guess she was being naive. And there was room for interpretation because he said thing, not person. He's not very loyal to Betty. In the next story, Della walks through a mirror telling Hilda that Sabrina hasn't fulfilled her confusing monthly quota of bad deeds, and Hilda's just sitting there with a book. She threatens to take away Hilda's splinter-proof broom handle. Logically, Hilda would be being sarcastic here. Can't she just buy a new one? If it's so hard to imagine that she can't just zap up a new one? Wouldn't that be a spell in the magic book? Hilda tells Sabrina that she has to perform a dozen bad deeds in a hurry, and brings her to the carnival, rather than the city prison, where she could at least feel good about messing with the criminals as a decent compromise. Hilda says that because the carnival is a place where people go to have a good time, all bad deeds committed here count for double. Sabrina reluctantly admits that she's lucky Hilda's here to help her. She fortunately fouls up Reggie's throat. I guess the reason why she can't just focus on Reggie is that he gets suspicious that something supernatural was targeting him, and really freak out. And she'd feel bad about it and stop. But come on, she could turn herself invisible and follow him around all day. I'd be fine with a story about that. The ball hit something to give Archie the best prize when he didn't even swing the hammer. Sabrina's actually embarrassed, and thinks that she could do a better bad deed blindfolded. Veronica's told to get on the scale, and I can't blame her for wanting to embarrass her after the last story I saw her in, where she can't even have the communication skills to be upfront and honest with her boyfriend. How can I trust someone like her? What kind of girlfriend acts like that? That's not normal. It says something that in all the media I've seen, I only remember Veronica acting like that as a girlfriend. Sabrina said she'll increase her weight greatly, and Veronica is just happy she got to win a prize, which is the lamp she always wanted. Huh? How'd this happen? Sabrina messes up the custard machine and sprays the Jughead's head as the guy at the custard machine fortunately apologizes and wants to make it stop. Predictably, Jughead's happy about this and eats the custard. Della complains about all the happy faces when she's at least fun-loving enough to ride the merry-go-round. Sabrina's next bad deed is to foul up the merry-go-round, so it starts spinning really fast and Della gets sent to a barrel of custard. And this is exactly why she's an idiot for making Sabrina do this stuff. And the reason it can backfire on her is that she keeps insisting on visiting her. Normally it wouldn't backfire on her because most witches aren't around her, but here, she can't hide from the consequences, so why doesn't she learn? She borrows Hilda's broom so she can get as far away as possible from apprentice witches. Sabrina's told that she needs just one more bad deed to fill her quota. She looks at an orange cat that's mad and does nothing. Then Hilda tells her that she just performed a bad deed on Salem, and Hilda says, she says your version of bad deeds gives her a headache. Huh? First of all, this is Salem? He's not talking. Second, she says she. If this really is Salem, what's the point? This is the most random and underwhelming way to introduce him. It would be boring if Salem just meowed and that was it at best. It diminishes a character's ability to show an interesting personality. That's Cat's problem, Kid vs. Cat. After a comedy page where two witches fly towards each other and then start floating down because the brooms have parachutes in them just in case, which is a pretty smart idea. The next story has Sabrina say goodbye to Harvey as Archie says that women are impossible with no context. Veronica wants to punish him by throwing herself at the nearest guy, which happens to be Harvey, who's drawn unrecognizably. What were they thinking? Sabrina catches Veronica, and if this was written by Ian Flynn, then she would make a mistake by stupidly assuming that's just what it looks like and Harvey's cheating on her, which would be the cheap drama route. Though she'd have somewhat of a point to assume that, because Harvey's happily returning her affection, so she would have good reason to be jealous. But because Sabrina actually has a brain here, for once, or is at least too naive, she immediately figures out what Veronica's up to by thinking to look over at Archie's face. Because Archie wants to attack Harvey, Sabrina brainwashes him into humiliating himself. He offends Veronica by calling her one of the guys, and Harvey says he's out to hurt her and it's sheer jealousy. Veronica says that he's really going to be his now, and Archie asks how I could mistake Jughead for Veronica. I actually giggled. How could I mistake Jughead for Veronica? How? Harvey annoyingly asks who's Sabrina, as Veronica asks if he was ever serious with her. She's merciful enough to think Harvey doesn't deserve punishment, and wants to make him unattractive to Veronica, who she calls Vulture. Wouldn't Veronica hear Sabrina say her spell? She should have just been thinking it. She casts a spell to make Veronica see Harvey as a donkey. So she screams and runs into Archie's arms, somehow expecting him to save her, because she thinks she's hallucinating. Then she wouldn't need saving. Just help. He says that she's not alone, and it must be because they're upset. So the story ends with them making up. In the first story, Jughead took Sabrina's magic book because he found its hiding place right away thanks to Sabrina's recklessness. And he reads out its spells thinking it's just a joke. And somehow a mere mortal manages to actually cast those spells. I'm forced to assume it's because Sabrina uses the magic book so much that her magic leaked onto it. It's either that or he's at least part witch and doesn't know it. Why wouldn't they explain this? So Sabrina has to undo all the spells he did, which mercifully had no consequences. It was an interesting story to see. The second story, after giving us an establishing character moment for Veronica's manipulative of Archie instead of just honest and trustworthy, has Sabrina one-up her by brainwashing Harvey, which is just there to embarrass Veronica by freaking her out. I see Veronica act like this, and I honestly wonder why there's any kind of support for Archie/Veronica. I mean, she's not a good girlfriend at all, not even an okay one. Maybe they made her better in the later Archie comics, like how they made Ethel look better and forgot the point of her character. I don't understand why there would even be shipping wars. Why would there be like 50-50 support when Veronica acts like this? Maybe they're hoping Archie can change her? Wasn't there a story where Veronica was married to him in the future and she was just as mean to him? The third story is about Sabrina's attempts to reluctantly do bad deeds to fill Della's quota, all screwing up at the carnival, somehow. Until she gets one right against Della herself. That was satisfying at least, and it was good for Sabrina that she didn't get punished for it. The final story at least tried to make up for its annoying portrayal of Harvey, because the artist made him look unrecognizable to fit it. And that's Veronica flirt with Harvey to try to make Archie jealous enough to go back to her. Since when did she have to do that, though? I wish I knew why I was leaving her in the first place. So Sabrina keeps screwing up, bringing them closer together, until eventually she uses magic to make Harvey look unattractive, just to get Veronica off him.